Was the relationship between Andrew Thomas and Sheriff Arpaio, was that good for Maricopa County?
I think in terms of criminal justice, it was good. We've seen crime go down 20% over the last 4 years. That means we've had 32,000 fewer burglaries, 9,500 fewer aggravated assaults, 5,500 fewer robberies, 6,300 fewer arrests. I think when you look at that, that sort of an impact, that is a good thing.
Good for the county?
There has been some decrease in the criminal activity, and that's nationwide as well. But overall, no. Look, when you start conducting criminal investigations and start calling the judiciary corrupt and the board corrupt, and you have an outside judge come in and say that the sheriff and the county attorney have abused their power for political purposes, it undermines the entire system. And it is going to take a significant amount of time. It's going to take a change to restore that trust.
Okay, I want to get to immigration here and the idea that someone who has been smuggled can be charged as a conspirator, I should say, to their own smuggling. Do you agree with that line of thought?
From a legal standpoint, it is legal in Arizona. But with Senate Bill 1070, the legislature made a specific piece of legislation that made it a misdemeanor, and Senate Bill 1070 is the better way to proceed.
Okay, how do you see that idea of the smuggled as co-conspirators?
Well, I see it as a good tool for Arizona, and talk about disingenuity. Rick, you've set up a scheme where people can't be prosecuted under 1070. So your failure to prosecute co-conspirators means essentially that someone who pays to be smuggled into this country, who negotiates for client services to be smuggled into this country, gets away with a pass. There's no criminal consequence now for it. And why do I say that? Look, Ted, when you have a coyote who's negotiated for services with their client to smuggle them into this country, charging both as co-conspirators makes sense as a tough prosecution policy. But under Rick's policies for charging cases under 1070, and just 3 quick points, he misstates the corpus delicti rule about the evidence needed to charge the case. He doesn't address circumstantial evidence to prove someone's been here willfully. And third, he specifically told prosecutors not to charge those cases where there's another felony. And that's just not the way general prosecution policy works. It's wrong. It's not good for Maricopa County.
You know, it's ironic, you know, that Mr. Montgomery sits there and he dances around it, but through all of that legalese, he sits there and he says that 1070 isn't the right way to go. It's better to prosecute under the conspiracy to smuggle oneself. That's the better way to go. That's what he's basically saying. Look,
No,
if I could finish, Mr.
No,
Montgomery.
go right ahead. I just want to make a point that I want to answer that.
You know, he raises issues of corpus delicti, you know, what it takes to prove a case. I think this is a distinguishing difference between he and I. Under Senate Bill 1070, the legislature referenced some federal law, and there are certain elements of that crime that must be proved. I believe that the ends do not justify the means. You must prove it. Every county attorney in this state agrees with my legal analysis of what's necessary to prove the case. Only Mr. Montgomery, 4.5 years as a prosecutor, and that is it. That is all it is.
Well, you went up
the
to
record,
4, so you're going in the right direction.
4.5 years as a prosecutor. He's the only one that has analyzed it that way from the county attorney's perspective. It's unanimous around the state.
And real quick, Ted, and first, if your idea of leadership is popularity, then go be the executive director for the Arizona Prosecuting Attorneys Advisory Council. And then you can have all of the county attorneys agreeing with everything you do. Look, the other county attorneys love the excuse Rick gave them to not enforce it. But that doesn't mean that that's the only way to go about it. And let's be clear here. I believe that we should enforce employer sanctions, which my opponent decided to retreat from. I believe we should prosecute both a coyote and their client. And in those circumstances, we don't know the manner or means in which someone came here illegally, then 1070 is the appropriate tool. But I see all three together. I'm not saying one over the other, and that's an important difference too, because my opponent here is, I'm sorry, Rick, but you're just wrong for Maricopa County at this period of time. You did some good things in the past, but the situations we face now have moved on, and you're not addressing them right.
Please.
You know, Mr. Montgomery, I don't understand why you don't understand the basic phrase that says, I will enforce Senate Bill 1070. I'm not going to, you seem to be the only one that's not listening. I will enforce Senate Bill 1070. And I'm going to do more, which you disagreed with, that I'm going to start focusing upon the organized criminal activity, the cartels, the criminal syndicates, to go after those that are selling drugs to our children, that are assaulting our community. But I want to talk about the employer sanction. He has said that I've retreated from employer sanction. Actually, I've gotten better and stronger with it. When I first became county attorney, I did an analysis of our employer sanction efforts. It's been in existence for 3 years. $3.5 million have been spent. There's been one successful result out of that. Nobody can tell me that is a successful program. So what I did do, I did pull the money from the sheriff's office, and rather than have just one law enforcement agency be responsible for the investigative enforcement component, I'm pulling it in my office, and I'm inviting all 26 agencies to come into my office. And we've already got several agencies that are working with us on this. It's going to be smarter, it's going to be better, and we're going to have better results.
What do you think of that plan?
It sounds like he's coming up with a new product of Tide. Smarter, better, larger, cheaper. It's just wrong. And Rick, this is why I keep saying you're not going to enforce 1070. One of my favorite mottos from the Army was deeds, not words. You can talk like a politician all day long and say you're going to enforce the laws, but when we look at what you're doing, that's not true. You are backing off on employer sanctions. And here's something else that needs to be considered. Over those 3 years, investigations had to be started over once employees who had been hired before January 1st, 2008 were grandfathered in. And over 20 raids that were done, there were hundreds, if not at a minimum dozens, of illegal aliens who were stealing IDs to gain employment, were arrested. Now, Rick, you want to work your way up to get the cartels? Let me show you how you can do it. You start off by arresting the employees, and then you work with them. And you can, and I know you're familiar with this, but you can offer plea agreements if they will testify, and you work your way up to the first line leaders and managers, and then you go up to the bosses, and then you can work your way up to the cartels.
Absolutely. Listen, I know how to do investigations. I did ASCAM. I did many major investigations. So, Mr. Montgomery, which you haven't done yet, and for somebody that has not been inclusive of the county attorney's office, you seem to have a lot of details that Mr. Thomas, you weren't part of the immigration.
No, it's called being a good prosecutor, Rick. Something you may have forgotten how to do.
Can I finish?
Go right ahead.
Can I finish? Now I lost my train of thought. It seems like we get diverted every few seconds here, Ted. Listen. I don't know how many times I can say it. I'm going to enforce 1070. You know, Mr. Montgomery cannot talk out of both sides of his mouth. When I sit there and I give instructions to police departments of what it takes to prove a case, to submit it to our office, and he complains about that, that to me says that I am going to enforce Senate Bill 1070, and I'm going to do more, something that he has disagreed with in the past.
We've got about a minute left, so I need responses very